Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Work in Progress, the Personal Productivity Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. Let's get started. Today, I am joined by Thomas Edwards Jr., creator and author of The One-Up Effect and Next Level Marriage, and founder of The Professional Wingman. In today's episode, we are talking about attitude and how having a better outlook on life can level up your productivity. Let's get started. Hi, Thomas. How are you?
I'm good, Tia. How are you?
I am great, thank you. Where are you joining us from?
Right now, I am in Carlsbad, California, in the States,
Cool.
which is just outside of San Diego.
Nice. Very nice. How's the weather over there?
It's actually really nice. I went out with my daughter for a walk, and I actually flew in from Boston. I had like a speaking gig out in Boston where it
Cool.
snowed yesterday.
Oh, wow.
So to be here and it being
It's a
60
little
degrees,
different.
I felt
Yeah.
really good about it.
Oh, yeah. Wow. That's a little bit different. Oh, so nice. So thank you so much for being here. Your profession is quite multifaceted, as I've read. So for those who don't know you, do you mind explaining a bit about who you are and what it is you do?
Yeah. I wonder what's better, to go through the timeline past to present or present to past. Let's do
take as much
past to
time as you
present.
do. Yeah, we want to hear all about it.
Yeah. So back in 2009, I started my first coaching business, which was the Professional Wingman, and that coaching practice helps singles find love by going out, and I went out with them. And so basically, I went out with them to social venues, and I gave them real-time feedback on what prevented them from making romantic interactions happen. So I was literally their wingman. And through that, was able to create a lot of success, almost 400 marriages and engagements, tons of relationships. And then I wanted to shift gears and do something a lot bigger. And I love video games. And so when I allowed myself to really immerse in it, I saw that there was a lot of parallels between the experience of playing and performance.
Yeah.
And so that's when the One-Up Effect was born, which is basically a methodology that I created that allows you to gamify anything where you desire growth.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Wow.
And what I realized is that when we're able to gamify things and we use playfulness, it ends up becoming an elite form of mindfulness. And that type of mindfulness increases performance.
Yeah, wow.
And so did that. And then I started to think about, the various ways where we can apply playfulness, especially when it comes to parts of our lives that are really important, particularly our health, our relationships, and our wealth. And naturally, I just love relationships and communication. So I went back to relationships and being a dad and being married. I thought it would be a great place to apply gamification to marriage. And so that's where Next Level Marriage comes into play. And I work with burnt out dads who are struggling in their marriage. And I help them save their marriage, keep their families together, and enjoy the experience of balancing career, family, and life.
Yeah, wow. Oh my gosh, that's incredible. Wow, that is a serious kind of like journey you've been on there. And I'm sure everyone said this to you. And I just have to ask, so you're like the real life Hitch. Like this is like this is like actually.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So the media will say, and you'll if you look me up, you'll see that they've called me the real life Hitch. I personally don't claim that because I do not want Sony Entertainment coming after me.
Yeah.
But that's what a lot of people say about me.
Wow.
And they wouldn't be wrong.
Amazing. Oh, that's so cool there. So you mentioned that you were really interested in these different things and kind of improving life and all that kind of stuff. But how do you get into that in like a professional aspect? Because it's not exactly like a job that is like suggested to you in like you don't really go, oh, you can be a doctor or a teacher or a lawyer, or you can be this like massive
Or be a
life consultant.
professional wingman.
Yeah, exactly. How do you like what brain pattern did you have to go through to kind of go like, yes, this is something that I'm going to do on like an executive level?
That's such a great question, because when I think about it, it just kind of happened, but
Okay.
it started
As they
because
usually do.
I
Yeah.
wanted to be better, right?
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
I had a lot of struggles in relationships and particularly confidence in myself.
Mm.
And I was just so focused on wanting to overcome those challenges. So I would go out and I would force myself to meet strangers in like
Yeah.
really
Wow.
challenging situations
Cool.
to get over the discomfort.
Yeah.
And then I blogged about it as a way to basically debrief and chronicle my development.
Mm.
And the blog started to catch wind, and I had friends who would follow me on social media and hang out with me and see all these amazing interactions that I would have, and then start asking me questions about it. And I said, well, this is what I would do, or why don't you try this? And it would
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
And then it led to one time where a buddy of mine asked me to help him literally be his wingman and introduce him to a woman at the bar that he found really attractive. And in that moment, I jokingly just said, well, what's in it for me? And
Yeah. Yeah.
he offered to pay for my drinks like the whole
Cool.
weekend.
Yeah. Wow.
So I figured, like, I have nothing to lose here. This is great,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I did it. They kind of linked up, and then the next morning he texted me and said, thanks for being my wingman. I just wrapped up my lunch date with her. She's awesome.
Oh
Let me know where
wow.
you are tonight. Drinks are on me. And then
Yeah.
it was in that moment I realized, wow, like there must be some
I'm
tremendous
really good
value
at
in
this. Yeah.
teaching other people how
Yeah.
to do this, right?
Yeah. Wow.
You're absolutely right. Like I think most people would see or consider the idea of a wingman as just something that people would do essentially for free.
Oh yeah. Totally.
And
Yeah.
I just always have this like kind of athlete mentality where, people can play basketball all the time, but there's only very few that get paid to do it, right? And
Yeah.
so why not be a
Exactly.
professional wingman
Yeah.
and get paid to do what other people do for free?
That's so
And then it
cool.
just snowballed from there.
That is like the best story. That's so much more interesting than like most of what I hear. But no, that's really cool. And I love that for you, honestly. That's amazing. So thank you for answering and introducing yourself. So we're going to do some get to know the guest questions now. So this is essentially the part of the show where I ask Thomas some questions, more personal questions about himself, so that the listeners can learn a little bit more. So I'm just going to ask you 4 questions. You ready?
All right, let's go.
Cool. Okay. So, what is a recent book you have read?
Okay, so the most recent book that I read, it was actually Profit First by Mike Michalowicz.
Okay.
I listened to it on Audible, and I highly recommend this book if you have your own business or an
Mm,
entrepreneur or just are in a position where you make a lot of money.
yeah.
Profit First is a
Yeah.
great system to
Okay.
use to help you manage where your money goes so that you're good now and well into the future.
Yeah. Interesting. Oh, okay. And that one you said you listened to that on audiobook, but it's available in like
Yeah.
hard copy kind
Yep.
of? Yeah.
Yeah, you
Okay.
can. Yeah, you can grab it on
Cool.
Amazon in whatever format.
Okay, cool. Second
Yeah.
question. What is a movie you would recommend? I always love this question because I am a movie buff, so it's like the only question I really care about. No, that's a lie. Don't put that in.
So this is good. I mean, we can always engage in this.
Yeah.
So the most recent movie that I've seen that I highly recommend is Avatar: Way of the Water.
Oh my gosh,
One
you
of the
saw
most
it. Whoa.
I've seen it twice.
You sat through it twice?
Yes,
That's like
and
an
cried
accomplishment.
at the end at the exact same place twice. I have no problem admitting this. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. That's
the
good.
movie, from its cinematography to the
Yeah.
storyline to just it's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. Wow.
I highly recommend it.
My goodness.
2 movies that I personally recommend that are my favorites: The Matrix, the first one.
Oh yeah.
Um,
It's a good movie.
Always a great reminder of like just kind of this kind of weird feeling of, are we in a simulation?
Yeah.
And if we are, can we actually leverage the simulation for us to live the life that we want, right? And can we actually break free,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Unplug.
I was just thinking like multiple Keanu Reeves, but like that's cool.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah, cool.
And then the other movie I'd highly recommend is also Inception.
Oh my
Just because I
gosh.
love the
Yeah.
idea
So good.
of
These are
where thoughts
solid
come from.
recommendations. Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go.
Those
See,
are really
I do
good.
appreciate that.
Those are like, so like seriously guys, like if you're listening and you haven't seen any of those movies, like please like stop what you're doing right now. Like I don't care. Just go watch them like
I
right.
mean, listen to this
They're like,
podcast and then go watch the movie.
Yeah, true. Okay. I'm getting a little too into this. But yeah, no, they're all really great. I haven't seen the new Avatar. Just because I have like very low, like I can't sit still for a very long time. So I
It's a
think
long movie
I have
for
to,
sure.
yeah, I think I have to wait for it to come out on like DVD or like Hulu or something.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I don't think I could go see it at the cinemas, but I can't wait to see it though. Like once I can see it kind of at my own leisure.
Yeah.
Because yeah,
You're gonna love it.
I am
It's amazing.
so excited for that. That's great. And yeah, Matrix, Inception. I love Inception. I've seen it so many times. It's genuinely just such an interesting film.
Yeah.
And just yeah, the end, it's just like, oh my gosh, it's just so good.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, we'll move on. We'll move on. Okay, so third question. What is your favorite podcast?
So I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, but right now the podcast I've been listening to regularly is actually the Brian Buffini show.
Okay.
Also known as It's a Good Life. And he is a real estate, well, he's a real estate agent who also now coaches real estate agents on how to live the good life and create a better business through his proprietary system. But he focuses on so many different areas of life, whether it's spirituality, business, finances, personal, family. And he really talks about it in a way that keeps you informed on what simple processes you can use to live that good life.
Yeah, wow.
And I just really enjoy him. He's a funny character, and I love his energy. So yeah, that's what I'd recommend.
Oh, cool. Okay. I'm interested just to like kind of branching off that. Do you listen to more kind of like educational, kind of like skill based like podcast, or more just kind of like fun, maybe like fictional podcasts? Because like we had someone on here the other day who doesn't like listen to podcasts for like any kind of like informative or educational purpose, like purely just for like fun, like listens to like fictional stories and all that kind of stuff. Do you just stick to like the people, the information, like that kind of more like fact finding kind of thing?
I've never thought about it until just now when you asked, right? Like for podcasts, I love learning. Like I love learning in general, right?
Yeah.
But specifically for podcasts, I'll tend to lean towards those where I can like learn something.
Yeah, me too.
And then for books, I'll also do that, but I also love manga. And so like I'll have that and I'll read that, and that'll be like my fun to have.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I never even thought about it. Like, it was actually one of the other hosts, because we've got like a couple podcasts, and there's like a bunch of us who host them, and so we all hang out and kind of chat. And she came on the show. For those listening, yeah, if you haven't listened to Gabriella's episode, then please listen to it, because we had so much fun recording it. And yeah, I asked her favorite podcast, and she was like, "Oh, like I listened to this one where it's literally like a TV series, but like no TV, it's just like a script, and they kind of like read it, and there's different characters, and like it's a storyline." Wow. And I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing. Like,
yeah,
it just didn't kind of cross my mind. Yeah, I was like, that's so cool, because I listen to podcasts for like informative kind of like learning based purposes.
Yeah.
So yeah, she was like, no, there's like this whole other world where it's like kind of like audiobooks, but it's like way more like fun. And it's just, I was just like, that's so cool. Like,
yeah, that I have heard of some like podcasts where they'll do it like that, and they'll have episodes, right? And so then they're having a whole season, and it's like this developed storyline. So that is interesting.
I like had no idea, because I don't know, I just lived in my own little bubble, and I just assumed that everyone listened to like the same kind of thing. Stuff. Yeah. Anyway, and my final question is a course you have completed. Doesn't have to be recent. It can just be like ever in your whole life?
Oh yeah. Well, I will say one of my favorite courses that I completed is the science of happiness. It's that
Ooh.
course that became famous, taught at Yale
Yeah.
by Laurie Santos, and she goes really into the science of what makes people really happy and how do
Mm.
you set your life up where it's filled with happiness. And
Yeah.
so I really enjoyed just like the data
Yeah.
and the research that went into actually what drives us to be happy.
That's so cool. I didn't even know
Yeah.
that with like you can learn about that kind of thing. But that is really interesting. I could see how, yeah, someone like you would definitely find that very, very interesting. That's great. Okay, well, thank you for answering those questions. So we're going to dive into more interview-based questions first, because today we're discussing attitude and how that affects our productivity. Da 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 da. But before I ask you any of those questions, for our listeners, Thomas, how would you define personal productivity?
Yes. So this is a very important question because we hear the word productivity all the time, right?
Mm,
And I wonder,
yeah.
does it get diluted? Does the definition kind of get misses the
Mm.
mark? Now, my personal definition of productivity is effectiveness of effort, right? And
Okay.
so when you're
Yeah.
putting in your effort, how effective are you in that effort? And I think that ultimately that's
Yeah.
productive, right? Like you may not need a lot of time to do the thing that you need to do,
Mm.
and that can be productive, but you could also take a long time and be really impactful in what you're doing, and that is also productive. And
Mm.
so it isn't kind of this black and white thing where it's like, well, I'm being productive because I'm taking less time. That's not
Yeah.
always the case. It's
Yeah.
really just about how much effort you're putting in and how effective that effort is.
Interesting. So, what do you think people get wrong about productivity?
Well, I think it's about how much you can do, like how much of things you can do in a short period of time,
Mm.
right? So it's kind of like quantity based and then time based. And
Yeah.
sure,
Okay.
like I think there's some truth to that. I think when you don't want to necessarily waste time or spend time doing things that you can do for less so you can do other things, that
Mm.
makes sense. However, when we start to go in the context of what we love to do and things that we enjoy doing and having the space to put all of our energy into doing that thing, knowing that all of our effort is being really effective, I believe that's productive too.
Interesting. Okay. So, what are your thoughts on like hustle culture? Because that's something that has definitely kind of come up, especially I heard about this a lot during COVID in terms of like, we're in lockdown, like making the most of like your time, like, like this is an opportunity, blah, blah, blah. What do you think of hustle culture? Like, what are your personal kind of thoughts on it?
As someone who used to live like that,
Okay.
it's not sustainable.
Yeah. All
Um,
right.
I think it can be a great driving force when it comes to beginning projects and even pushing through projects, but
Mm-mm.
as a whole way of being, I just don't believe that it's sustainable.
Yeah.
And the reason why is if you're go, go, go all the time, at some point, you're going to be making choices that ends up leading you abandoning yourself. You abandon your well-being, your
Yeah.
mental
Yeah.
well-being, your friends, other things that actually are important to you in
Mm.
life. And when you start doing that, that's no longer productive,
Yep.
you
Yep.
know? And so then you create all this space to hustle. And then we get into this conversation of how productive really are you? How effective is the effort that you're really putting in, you know? And I
Yeah.
think sometimes once again, we sometimes get confused with, well, if I'm in the hustle culture, that means 24/7, I need to be doing my job. And yeah, you can create that environment, but how effective are you really being in putting in all that time? You know,
Yeah.
is it
True.
really that worth it? You know, or is it more of like
Interesting.
I need to look like I'm hustling
Mm.
so I can be appreciated and kind of seen by my peers and my colleagues?
Definitely, yeah. I think I totally, yeah, I agree with the latter comment in terms of like being seen as hustling. I think is like a major part of like hustle culture. I
Yeah.
think it's something like people want to look productive, like they're doing something like all the time
Yeah.
because like looking like you're not doing anything. You just, I don't know, there's this kind of like this negative sort of attitude, like, oh, you know, they're not doing anything like this, like why I'm doing all this stuff, why aren't you doing anything? And I think there's a massive part of that. Like even when you just sit down to do something, I've never really thought about it in terms of like effort versus kind of like what you're actually doing, because you can just sit down and kind of like do stuff and it looks like you're hustling, but like how effective is it actually because of like the effort that you're actually putting in? I say this as someone who's like
Yeah.
currently at law school, and so I can sit down and study, but like am I really actually
Yeah.
doing anything, or am I just listening to like a lecture and it's not like
It's not hitting, right?
nothing's going, and I'm not actually helping my future self. I'm just looking like I'm doing something.
Yeah, like you're going through the actions, right? Like you're playing the part. And here's another kind of misconception about productivity, right? We just assume that productivity is about doing. Like you have to do, you're doing something, right? Like you're
Yeah.
active. But there's also productivity in being passive and not doing something too.
Yeah,
And I think
definitely.
that's also important.
So like one of the biggest things that I've definitely taken away from hosting this show for I don't even know how long now, is yeah, everyone's definition of productivity is like different in terms of how they deliver it. But I think the biggest thing that I've taken away is like productivity doesn't mean that you have to be working for like financial or career like gains. It can mean just like actually sitting down and, you know, relaxing with your family, or taking some time to meditate, or doing some laundry, or like, you know, just taking
Yeah.
some time to relax, or, you know, coloring in. I don't know, like whatever it is that
Yeah.
you need to do, because those things still are inherently productive, because they're helping you kind of maintain your energy levels and your balance so that you can go back and kind of achieve more things in like your career
Yeah.
and your personal life and all that kind of stuff. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
I found it,
It's
yeah.
it's really it's about the mastering of managing your energy,
Yeah,
right? And like
definitely.
you might have all the energy in the world, but if you're not really being effective with how you're using it, then it doesn't really mean anything. And then if you're not being intentional with how you recharge and
Mm,
recalibrate, then when you go back into the doing, it's still not going to be as effective either, right? And
definitely.
so, you know, anyone who stays up for 24 hours can attest to this
Yeah,
theory, right?
yeah.
It's like you could try to repeat the same day the next day and not sleep right that
Mm.
night and know that your productivity levels are going to be drastically
Oh yeah,
diminished, you
totally.
know, and that's just based
Definitely.
on physical. But
Yeah.
as we know, like the physical affects the mental, and then it's a
Mm.
trickle down effect.
Yeah, definitely. So we've talked about productivity, what it means, da 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 da. So now let's talk about attitude, which is what we're here, which is why you're here. So based on your experience, how would you define attitude? Because when I think attitude, I think like 5-year-old me and my dad being like, you have your mum's attitude. And like me getting like constantly like, wow, she's got big attitude. But I don't, this is definitely not kind of like what you're talking about. I don't think anyway. Because that's what I think. Because I think when you, yeah, when people say like, oh, they've got an attitude, or, you know, da da da, it's like a negative
Yeah.
kind of connotation. But we're here to talk about how it affects our productivity. So going back to my question, based on your experience, how would you define attitude? What does it mean for you?
Yeah, I mean, your attitude is basically a combination of your thoughts and your feelings. You know that, and that's it. You know, we can break it down even more. You know, when we think about cognitive behavioral therapy,
Mm,
they really focus on the thoughts, feelings, behavior cycle,
yeah.
right? And so when your dad's like, "Oh, you got your mom's attitude," that's just based on the behavior in which he has seen from you and
Yeah.
his wife, right?
Yeah.
But it starts from the thoughts and the feelings, you
Yeah.
know, and then it gets expressed through the behaviors. So if you have a bad attitude, that's typically because your thoughts and your feelings are negative and or heavy, which is leading
Mm,
to negative and non-product, not like destructive behavior.
yeah.
Whereas if you have what's considered a positive attitude, right, like your thoughts and your feelings are lighter and positive, and so it's leading to more productive, proactive behavior. But
Interesting.
yeah, all the doing and the actions that are associated with productivity starts in the thought.
Yeah. So in terms of just like going back to attitude, because I think this is a concept that like I hear about, but I haven't really grasped on like a certain personal level. I'm like, how do you separate your attitude from like how does that kind of coexist with your personality? Like, is that something
Mm-hmm.
different in and of itself, or is it connected? Like, how do you? What are your thoughts?
So I will share my kind of belief around it in terms of how I got around it, because when I was in my 20s, I was very ego driven and ego led, right? And so all of my decisions, my actions, my reactions were all based on my egoic thoughts.
Mm.
And those thoughts drove my feelings. And then it dictated the behaviors that ended up being destructive and not productive, right?
Yeah.
And so this was a lather, rinse, repeat process. And when you have an ego that doesn't have any boundaries, it's going to just unleash, in a way that can really be harmful, not just to its host,
Mm.
right, me, but to the people in my life.
Mm.
And I was unconscious to the impact of that. And when I finally was able to get to a place where I saw like the damage and the destruction, it made me realize, okay, I need to work on putting boundaries around my ego, and
Right.
to
Okay.
start doing other practices that can allow me, my ego, to not be as loud,
Mm.
and to have something more soulful, more spirited inside of me be the louder voice.
Yeah.
That tends to be the more positive, uplifting, lighter attitude.
Mm.
And so, in other words, spirituality for me served as the boundary in which to host, to be able basically to allow my ego to still exist, right? Because we all have
Mm.
personalities, right?
Yeah.
But to have those boundaries in place, so even if my ego is freaking out because it feels unseen, or if it feels a certain way, it's not going to lead to a point where you're behaving in a way that's destructive and not productive.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah, that makes a little more sense because yeah, I was like, okay, I was like, how do I? And then the personality and the ego, and yeah, I was trying to like connect the dots. But yeah, I get where you're coming from. So, how do you think a person's attitude influences their overall personal productivity?
Okay, so if we go back to that example, right, in cognitive behavioral therapy, there's a cycle, right? Your thoughts dictate your feelings, and your feelings drive your behaviors,
Yeah.
right? And so our thoughts typically come up right when we're about to do something, or something happens to us. So, for example, if I get cut off like if I'm driving on the street and someone like cuts me off and gets in front of me, right? My thought, depending on what that thought is, could take me down a road that will lead me to a behavior that will either be
Yeah.
like productive
Yeah,
or not
I get you.
productive,
Yeah.
right? And so what sometimes we just think that our feelings drive our behaviors, and that's just partially true.
Mm.
We have to actually think of something to evoke the feelings. And
Yeah.
then we
Okay.
get in a space where, are we going to act on these feelings, or are we going to allow these feelings to actually process through our bodies and
Mm.
let them go, and then have a clear space where we can actually do the action in which we feel most intended to do. So
Yeah.
in that moment, I can feel my body reacting when I get cut off in the road, and my thought could be, "Oh my gosh, that person's such a jerk," or it could be, "Wow, that person's really in a rush. I hope everything's okay."
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now, my feelings towards that experience completely change, and then my behaviors change towards it too. I might
Mm.
slow down. I might create space. I'm not gonna speed up or try to
Yeah.
cut them off,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
which can happen, right? I've
Yeah.
definitely have done that in the past, right? And so, um, our thoughts really drive a lot more of our productivity than we think.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never really thought about it like that, but I guess it's definitely true because I think and it kind of just comes up in sort of everyday life, but you don't really think of it as like something that is driving your actions. Like, you know, even when you're just having conversations and someone will be like, oh, what do you think of this person? And they'll be like, oh, they like this. And then someone will be like, oh, maybe they're just like that because of like XYZ. And then you're like, oh yeah, okay, maybe maybe I won't be rude to them. Like, you know, it's yeah,
Yeah.
you kind of have that process. So going back to having a positive attitude, why do you think it is essential to have a positive attitude towards what it is that we do, whether it's our work or our lifestyle in general?
Honestly, it's good for our health. It really
Okay.
is. You know, when we carry a negative attitude, there is a different structure that, or a different reaction that our bodies actually, um, there's just something that physiologically that happens in our bodies. You know,
Mm.
our cells take on that energy. And it actually, when we continue to stay in negative thoughts, it actually can break down the health in our bodies externally and internally. Like, for example, some people who experience stress may break out in hives,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Someone who might experience deep stress may actually
Yeah.
experience like cramps or
Mm.
failed organs, or they might be the studies have actually shown that even negative thoughts can actually create cancer,
Yeah.
you
Wow.
know, because of just the negativity, the darkness of that. And
Yeah.
so the having a positive, practicing having a positive outlook. And by the way, positive doesn't have to be like, oh my gosh, everything is awesome, right? Because
Yeah.
that's just not life, right?
Yeah. No.
It
Yeah.
just I would even go as far as say not so much positive attitude, but a more proactive attitude.
Yeah.
You know, where you're just not allowing yourself to be at the bottom,
Yeah. I was just going to
right?
ask,
And even
like,
if
do
you
we
are
want
at
to
the
kind of
bottom,
define that? Yeah. What
yeah,
does
right.
it
Even if
mean
you
to
are
have
at the bottom,
positive?
you're still looking to where you want to go,
Yeah.
you know? And I
Yeah.
think that's really important. So when you're able to maintain that, it just becomes now this way of being that
Yeah.
then leads to you having the energy to then be productive,
Yeah.
right? Because if you're putting in positive or proactive effort,
Mm.
naturally the effectiveness of that is going to be a lot more than if you weren't feeling good about what you were doing.
Interesting. So, how can we incorporate kind of like a positive attitude and outlook, sort of like, you know, overall happiness into our lives without regarding it as like a difficult thing to achieve? Because like we can say, oh yeah, like, you know, it's essential to have a positive attitude to help your productivity, but like how do you maintain a positive attitude when, you know, life is you know, life, and it hits you with different kind of stuff? How do you kind of incorporate that into your life without having to like physically try and kind of like, you know, you having to like conjure it up really hard and be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna try and be like really positive today? Like, how do you kind of maintain that attitude?
Yeah, like we expect us to kind of like psych ourselves up,
Yeah.
right? To kind of overcome the
I do that,
experience.
yeah.
And
Like, I'm gonna be
yeah,
happy
right. And
today.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
right. Like today's gonna be a great day,
Yeah.
right? And you can feel that, and that could be great, and that could work for you for like the first hour, right? But then life will happen and
Yeah.
question you, and
Yeah.
you're like, wait, today was supposed to be a good day. Like, why is this not a good day? And
Yeah.
that's just one tool of many tools
Mm.
that you can have in your toolbox to
Yeah.
pull out at any moment throughout the day. And so in terms of practices, there's like affirmations, there's meditation, you can journal, you can connect with someone that you love and care about, who you feel safe with, and express and have a fun connection. You can play music. There's environmental things that you can do. There's
Mm.
essential oils, there's
Yeah,
prayer,
that's a
there's,
lot of different stuff. Yeah.
doing jumping jacks, like part of the practice is stimulating yourself with things that
Mm.
bring you joy,
Yeah.
right? So when we talk about like happiness, right, and relationships, because I'm sure when people first listen, they're like, a professional wingman, like what does this have to do with productivity, right? And
Yeah,
like
yeah.
attitude. But ultimately, what you want to do is you want to find opportunities throughout the day to stimulate your mind, your body, and your soul
Yeah.
in a way where you're feeling joy and you're
Yeah.
experiencing fun. And that
Yeah.
just naturally puts you in this higher energetic state
Mm.
where you're much more proactive. and you're curious and you're less critical. This is why I love playfulness so much. When we are playing, we don't think about how bad we're doing.
Yeah.
We don't beat ourselves up, if we lose the game, lose that round per se, especially if we're learning how to play a new game.
Yeah.
We actually become more curious. And because we have a chance to play that game again, we don't see that experience of losing as failure. We see it as an opportunity to receive
I don't
feedback.
know. I think my teenage brother would disagree with you, but but I see where you're coming from.
What happens, and it's still a feeling, right?
Yeah,
there's still a bummer.
Yeah.
But we forget often how resilient we are as human beings.
Yeah.
And playfulness allows us to really experience that resilience, And I just often find when I'm working with my clients, right before they go into something that either they've worked really hard on or they're nervous about, when they do the thing that brings them joy and happiness, they stop thinking about the what ifs and they stop having the anxiety.
Yeah.
And they go in with more of this sense of peace and curiosity rather than like this stress and fear of what could happen. So I always find that when you're able to sprinkle those experiences throughout the day, whatever that may be for you, it could be walking out in nature, it could be going for a yoga, class, or it could just be listening to, a podcast book, right?
Yeah.
It could be one of those things, right? Definitely. Or it could be watching The Matrix, right? Like I've seen that movie well over 100 times, right?
Wow.
And I will continue to watch that movie, But I know when I turn that on, I'm going to feel a certain sense of joy, right? Because that's what I'm after. And then I take that experience of joy and then I place it into now my effort. And all of a sudden now my effort's more effective, and that's productivity.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That was nice mic drop kind of situation. Yeah, that was great. No, I totally, I agree. And I think just like learning to, look at things from a more playful perspective, I think is something that I've learned as I've gotten older. I'm like, okay, I need to kind of like be a little bit more lighthearted in the way I go about things. Like I don't have to, getting on the train doesn't have to be like a, yes, tick that off, mission completed kind of situation. It can be like, I'm getting on the train and this is cool. And like I saw some kids like they were on the, I was going to say on the tracks. They weren't. They were on the station platform. That sounded so bad. They were standing at the platform and like clearly they don't get on the train very often. Like their mum was taking pictures and they're all standing there like this. And I was like, I do this like every day. But it was just so nice to like see these like kids get like super excited about, we're going on the train. Like this is so cool. And that just made me smile. I was like, that's just so nice. Like just little things. And even like recently, and I found this has helped my productivity. This is going to sound like it doesn't, but it does, like you mentioned. I listen to like 70s like disco music in the morning, and it's just the best. Like it's just so good. It genuinely changes like my whole headspace. Sometimes it does inform my outfit choices for the day, which is like sometimes I kind of come out. My brother's like, why are you like, what's going on here? It's like you got patterns and flare pants but like I don't know, you listen to like Peaches and Herb and like Jackson 5 like in the morning and you kind of it puts you in a good headspace. And I do my makeup and I get ready and I clean my room. And, once I sit down, I kind of turn it down and put down like, something a little bit more lo-fi and chill to like get me into the study zone. But it sets a good kind of like precedent for the day. Like this is going to be fun. You can't be sad listening to like 70s disco music. Like it's just not.
You can't.
You can't.
It's not really possible,
no, it's
right?
really not.
And here's what's really interesting, right? Like your environment will dictate your productivity.
Yeah.
So if let's say, you broke up with your partner, right? Like you're not going to go home and like all of a sudden want to play 70s disco. Like that's not going to be like your initial like desire. You're probably going to put on like Jack Johnson or like John Mayer, and you're probably going to light candles and you're going to have a tissue box there, right? Like you're going to set the scene to feel your sadness. And by the way, I'm not recommending that you don't allow yourself to feel that sadness.
Yeah, definitely.
What I'm saying
like
is if you don't feel it. Like let yourself feel your feelings. And once they're processed, create a new environment for how you want to be now moving forward. Right. And so environment plays a huge role in that. And if you can allow your environment to almost naturally put you in that kind of playful, fun, excited state, then it makes it less likely for you to be impacted by negative forces that will come at you throughout the day.
Yeah.
So when I think about like a game like mentality, like imagine if everyone walked around this earth and you saw like their health bar, right?
Whoa.
And like everyone's health bar was out of 30, you know?
Yeah.
And some people, they work themselves like really hard and they might burn like 29 points out of 30. And like they're at 1 and they go to sleep. They naturally assume that because they went to sleep that their health bar goes back to 30, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
Their health bar might go back to 20. And there's some other things that they would need to do to put themselves in the state and to feed themselves to get to 30. But if we're in hustle culture, you don't do that. You bypass all of those things. And now you're trying to do the same thing with less energy, a less of a health bar, right? So you have 20 out of 30, but you still need 29, right? And then if you try to do this over and over, eventually that health bar will get to 0. And that's burnout.
Yeah.
Right. But in games, like you actually die, right? Like you can't live, right?
Yeah.
But on a more serious note, there are people who burn out to the point where they actually end up dying, right? Physically, because of just the deterioration and often suicide, right? So it is a serious thing on that end. And so when we create these environments and we talk about attitude and why it's so important is because it fills us up. So that way, when we put in the effort to do the things that we do, it becomes more effective, which means you're not spending 25 points out of 30 every day.
Yeah.
Maybe today you're spending 28 because you chose to do something for yourself that actually put you in a much more positive attitude or proactive attitude.
Yeah.
And then over time, you get to a point where maybe you're only burning half of your health bar a day, but still doing more for yourself and for other people. Like imagine what that would look like, you know? And so when I talk to my clients about that, I tell them, you know, when you make certain changes in your mindset, you can become 10, 20, 30% more productive and still feel like you have energy to do other things like go home and be a dad. Right? Or take your wife out on date night, you know, and be able to feel like you have the energy to do those things just because you've changed your mindset and you've created the environment that's more conducive to that.
Yeah. It's so interesting how like having a positive mindset just influences our productivity. It's not something that I ever kind of like put together because like as someone, like I mentioned before, I'm still like I'm studying at the moment and I have to study like whether or not I want, like whether or not I feel like it and whether or not I'm happy about doing it. But I think, having that external happiness, even though I might not be entirely happy about having to write the 3,000 word essay that I don't really care about, I still, because I kind of have this external happiness or this internal happiness, I guess, I can kind of just do it without it feeling like it's really affecting my mood. I don't know. It's just, it's such a weird kind of concept. And it's something that sort of takes your head a bit to get around because it's like, how does me being happy influence like me doing well at work? Like, how does that, like, because you don't really put it, you don't really like put it together. Like it makes sense, you know, holistically, but you're kind of like, well, isn't that just like an action? Like, why do I have to have this like mindset before I even go into it? It's just such an odd concept.
Yeah, well, I mean, we also we oftentimes are put in situations where productivity is reward based, right?
Yeah.
And so if we do certain things and we do it in an effective way, then we get rewarded with something, and so we tend to chase that external reward. But thanks to this class I took, The Science of Happiness, thank you, Larry Santos, right? I've learned that the things that we tend to go for externally don't actually make us happy. It may make us happy like in the moment in which we acquire it, but because our minds go through what's known as hedonic adaptation, the moment we acquire something that's new, it immediately becomes stale.
Yeah.
And then we go into this process of looking for the next thing, right? And so when you put yourself into, having these moments where you're playing, 70s disco. Like imagine playing 70s disco while you're trying to like study.
Yeah.
Right? Like
I don't get anything done. Yeah.
Right? Like, and you brought up a really good point, right? Like there's certain things in life that you're gonna have to do whether you're happy or not.
Yeah.
Right? But it doesn't mean that you can't still create an environment to put yourself in as best position to enjoy and in the experience as possible. For example, I'm not a big fan of like doing dishes.
Yep.
But I have to do them
With you
most
there.
nights.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not the biggest fan of doing those things. So what I decided to do, I put on music. For me, it's reggae, and I'll put on reggae and I'll like vibe. And all of a sudden now, like dishes are sparkling, and the kitchen's clean, and it didn't feel like it took that long. But if I'm like dreading it, it's going to take me twice as long.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to go slow. I'm not going to do as good of a job because I don't care about it, right? And I'm not enjoying it.
Yeah.
And what is kind of goes under the radar is that actually builds momentum. Yeah. So if I go in and not feel excited about this experience tonight of washing my dishes, I'm definitely not going to be excited about it Tuesday. And I'm going to feel even worse about it Wednesday. Yeah. Right? So come Saturday, I'm probably going to end up doing like half the dishes and I'm going to leave the rest there. Right? Like that even the feelings of that can build momentum over time, Yeah. And so the inverse is true too. Yeah. I can look forward to doing the dishes. I mean, I like the experience of doing the dishes, but I can look forward to doing them because I get to listen to my music.
Yeah. Interesting.
Right?
Yeah. No, I like that. I like that. I think my follow-up question on that is, we talk about a positive attitude and ways that we can develop it, etc. But I think a lot of people, when they think about developing positive attitude and kind of, growing that happiness and all that kind of stuff, you think of all these things that you like have to do to get there. It's like, oh, well, if I want to do that, then I have to go to the beach and then I'm going to have to make time to go to the beach. And, or I've got to, go buy a new candle or a shirt or like something, I've got to like, oh, I've actually got to do this to kind of get there. And it's going to take time out of my day. And I think I've definitely thought about this in terms of, like, oh, it'd probably be good for me, headspace wise, physically or whatever, to go for a walk or to go to the beach or, to do a meditation. But my instant kind of reaction is like, oh, but I'm gonna be losing time. I don't have time.
Yeah.
I don't have time. So what advice would you have for people who want to, grow that positive attitude, develop that happiness, but are like worried about how it might obstruct their kind of growth and productivity kind of in the moment? Like they're worried about, oh, if I do this, I'm going to have to give up on that. Or if I do that, it's going to influence my, time at work or that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I get that all the time. And, this was one of the bigger reasons why I created the one-up effect, because when you consider the power of just one applied throughout life, it can be really significant. And here's why. I work with a lot of busy professionals where they'll say, I don't have time to do these things. Yeah. And I always challenge them, right? I was like, so here's a simple concept. 1%, right? 1% of your day is 15 minutes. Now, if you were to take 1% out of your productivity, so to speak, right? Let's say you're 100% productive, focus on work all the time, nothing else, right? Not your body, not your mind, nothing else, right? Do you think you'd really miss that 1%?
Yeah, true.
It's unlikely.
Yeah.
it's just unlikely. You know what I mean? And so those 15 minutes actually, I found just through working with my clients, increases productivity. Right? And so I personally believe that there's not a cost to this when you're talking about giving up, right? Yeah. Like you're giving towards, right? You're giving towards your mental well-being. You're giving towards a healthier body, giving towards a feeling of connection and love and a better relationship with yourself for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. And over time, because the experience becomes more fulfilling, you might give 2% or 3%.
Yeah.
4% still not a lot, right? But
Yeah.
that's an hour.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's an hour of your day.
Yeah.
And so the question is, do you really think that you're going to miss that 4% of time, not productivity, right? We're talking about time and productivity are two different things.
Yeah.
So if you're willing to give up 1% of your time and you think this is cost, but like I said, it's a price that you are investing in to actually increase your productivity, I think it's worth at least a test.
Yeah.
Right? At least a test to see. And the last concept I'll share is like when you're focusing on being 1% better every day, like miraculous things can happen. Right. And so, and you may have heard this or seen this, right? But if you stay stagnant, like 1 to the power of 365 is 1, right? Because there's just no growth. But 1.01 to the power of 365 is like around 37. So in theory, like spending 1% of your time a day trying to be 1% better could create potentially, right, in theory, 37 times the improvement possible.
Yeah.
Right. And that it might be difficult to measure. I mean, I have a methodology that helps with tracking and measuring if that's really possible. In a lot of cases it is. Right. But it's just a little bit, you know? And even like compounding, like you don't even have to compound. Like a lot of times people feel like they need to like habit stack, like, and do more each day.
Yeah.
Like if you just even focus on doing one thing and just being really good at it for a year, your life would change dramatically without having to add anything else. Right. And so I'm very anti giving up and more about adding, upgrading, or optimizing.
Interesting. No, I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's really cool. And I think this year, I don't know, for a lot of people, 2022 was just like, it went fast. It was terrible. It was a blur. Like it was a hot mess.
We're already almost done with January 2023. Like what happened?
I'm really not ready. It's just like, it just keeps coming. And it's not slowing down and it's not stopping. And I think that's what I've had to like grow to adjust to. I'm just kind of like, all right, this is just going to keep coming.
Yeah.
And I just have to learn how to like, deal with it, how to make it work for me. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've had going into this year, because I was burnt out last year and it was scary and it was bad and it was not cute. It was not an enjoyable experience. But I think so going into this year, I'm like, all right, we really don't want to get to that point again.
Yeah.
So this year, I think I haven't set myself like massive goals, but just like you said, sort of more mindset changes that are going to create that kind of like productivity effect, like that flow on effect. So, and that's just like really small things, like just meditating in the morning before I start like working or before I start studying or going out to do, big life things that you have to do when you're an adult. Just like meditating just for like 10 minutes at the start of the day. I started off just like 2 minutes because I just get like distracted really quickly. And so, but I built up and I could do like 15 minutes now, and it's only like almost the end of January. But it's been good.
Awesome.
And I'm just like, oh, okay, like this is giving me this, and just adding music here or making sure that this is always clean, or 5 minutes of cleaning every night is something one of the hosts for the other podcast, she does like home organization and cleaning and all that kind of stuff with homes, and she does that on the podcast. And we were talking about just doing like 5 minutes of cleaning just like every night, whether it's just like your desk or just like taking your clothes off the floor and actually putting them like in a basket or in the wardrobe or something. And it's just those little things. And it doesn't have to be massive, like habit stacking, goals, tracking, like blah, blah, blah. You can do that if that works for you. But I found that doesn't work for me because I just get disappointed and then I give up. So I just kind of like reverted back to mindset change. And I think it's had the most insane effect just like in the past month, just seeing myself just kind of, and I've got assignments due at the moment that, maybe I'm not that interested in them, but I don't entirely like dread doing them all that much because I'm like, okay, I'll get this done. It's fine. Like it's just so weird. It's nice. It's a
Yeah.
good feeling.
Yeah. Right. Like, and listen, like you're going to go through life and there's going to be some things that you're going to dread and not enjoy. And
Yeah,
like, that's just a part of life. Right.
totally.
But those are the things that you can't control.
Mm,
Right. But what you can control is how you choose to show up to it.
yeah,
Right. And so
exactly.
it sounds like you're taking these little moments, these are like little micro moments
Mm,
to just create a little bit of a shift,
yeah.
right? And when you're doing those things throughout the day, it really does build momentum. It really does recharge. Like,
Mm,
you know, if it's and listen, like the things that you don't want to do will drain your energy more than the things
yeah.
you love to do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When you're in a zone, like you have infinite energy, you lose
Mm.
track of time. Like, you forget that you had to go to the bathroom 2 hours ago, right? Like all these things like
Yeah, yeah.
take place, right? And then
Yeah.
when you're done, you're like, well, how did it become nighttime? Like, I feel like I could still go another like 12 hours,
Mm,
right? But when you do something you dread, it could feel like it's taking forever, right? And you
yeah.
feel exhausted when you're done. So in those moments, when you sprinkle these little things of 5 minutes of cleanup or um, I love organizing. So for me, like it's like Tetris, right? And so
Yeah.
I feel a sense of fulfillment when things are clutter free and organized and
Yeah.
where they are, and it gives me energy,
Yeah.
right? And so even just a little bit of that, a little bit of meditation, whatever those tools are, sprinkle them throughout the day.
Mm,
Don't try to like kind of top load them in the morning. Like there is magic in a morning routine, but I feel like there's more longevity in a daily routine.
yeah.
And so have them sprinkled out throughout the day so it gives you a little bit of that jolt to
Yeah.
kind of reframe your mind as you're going into that next thing that you do. And you'll be so surprised as to how efficient and effective you are in the
Mm,
effort that you're giving in those experiences when you give yourself a little bit of a dose of you prior to doing that,
yeah.
And that comes down to just your relationship with yourself,
Yeah.
right? Are you
Totally.
willing to give yourself, do you know yourself, right? To know what things really make you feel happy. And are you willing to give yourself those things when you need it,
Mm.
right? And when you do that, it can be more challenging to find the things you don't like to do than it is to find the things you do.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely. Yeah. It's such a weird, just like weird mind shift because you see yourself and you're just like, this is odd. I have energy. This is nice. So
Yeah.
yeah, going off that, we're going to talk about practices and habits, sort of experiment debriefs now. So this is essentially part of the show where I ask Thomas, the experts, what they do to apply kind of the things that we've learned. So what is a practice that you do to improve your attitude that helps your personal productivity?
Oh man, there's a whole list that
I'd
I look
expect,
into,
yeah.
and yeah, and I track every day. But I'll bring up one that that's not common.
Okay.
I talk to a stranger almost every day.
Okay. Like
And what
actively like going out
yeah,
to Okay,
yeah,
okay, okay.
right?
Right, we're on the same
Like,
page.
and there's different ways to go about it. There's different ways to do it, right? Like when the pandemic was really a big thing, there was a company, and it still exists, called Lunch Club.
Mm.
And basically, you sign up for it and they pair you with someone that you've never met. And basically, you set a time that you're available, and they find the mutual time, and then you guys connect in Zoom, and
Whoa.
you do those things, and you can set up for as many times as you want each week,
Yeah.
right? Um, but I learned that experience that like there's so much magic in meeting people that you don't know because it expands your worldview. You're
Mm.
guaranteed to learn something, and we
Yeah.
love to learn. We feel really good about having more knowledge than we did before.
Yeah.
But studies have actually proven that talking to strangers actually makes us happier as human
Yeah, wow.
beings. There's a grander connection to the world that we experience as a result of being someone new.
Yeah.
And this whole fear of talking to strangers has actually come from when we were kids. You know, when like we were little kids and you were told like,
you don't
talk
talk to
to
strangers,
strangers, right?
even though you
And
do when
maybe
you're a kid.
yeah, right. And maybe some of your parents, those out there, may have told you why. Right. And that why was probably so scary that like you didn't want to. But the thing is, that thing kept that story stayed with you through adulthood.
Oh yeah,
So when I
stranger danger was like such a
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely, right? So when I was going out with clients and I was connecting with them and I saw what was going on, it was clear to me that that story was still very prevalent.
Yeah, wow.
You know?
Yeah.
That and it made it difficult for them to talk to strangers, but we are wired as human beings to connect with one another.
Yeah.
Right? And that's just something that when I push myself to do that, I create these really unique opportunities. And I never go into a situation where I walk away and feel like, oh my gosh, that was a waste of time, or, oh wow, like that person did not make me happy. Right. I actually always have come out feeling good about myself.
Wow.
And so I
so
really would push people, you know, to give that a shot. You don't have to do it every day like I try to do. But even if it's just like once a week, you know, sit somewhere that you don't normally sit or go somewhere where you don't normally go. And or you can even do things that you normally do and just interact with the people that you don't normally interact with. Maybe it's the barista at the coffee shop. Maybe it's the cashier at the grocery store, you know, wherever that may be. You know, just having a simple interaction with them, you will feel better.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, that's so nice. So what would you say are some of the challenges that you face when doing this practice?
Making sure that I'm able to be in position to talk to strangers.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
You know, because I do work remotely, right? And so if I don't have, let's say, like a prospective client come in, or if I'm not going out because I'm working all day, that might be tough. And so I have to decide, do I want to like go out on my way to do that, or I'm just going to let that go today?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Sometimes I might actually find a simpler solution and try to like find something going on online to attend so I can meet people. But I find that my life is set up where the odds are in my favor to meet someone new each and every day.
Yeah.
That's cool. And so I'm fortunate to be able to do that. But for something like talking to a stranger, you really would have to kind of shift how you view your lifestyle and kind of how it functions for you to be able to do that. So I struggled with that at the beginning because I worked from home a lot and I was very comfortable being at home. So to actually go out, which I'm very comfortable doing, but to actually make the effort to go out and do that took a little bit of repetition to become like the normal thing.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I guess, I haven't really, thought about that, but I guess I do this for like a living. I talk to random people like almost 3 times a day, like every week, which is cool. Yeah, now that I think about it, it's an energizing experience. You're just like, you've got like such buzz. I don't know. I have to have a buzz because I'm a host, so I come with with a Red Bull. But it is a really nice, it is an interesting experience. So how do you think this practice impacts your personal productivity or your perception of life?
Yeah, I mean, you know, for me, the biggest thing is I get to have a more expansive view of the world.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's an experience that I didn't previously have that I have now, having gotten to connect with someone. And by the way, when I say talk to a stranger, I don't mean to like sit down and have this very involved, deep, you know, connected conversation. If it leads that way, that's pretty epic. But that doesn't have to be the goal each and every time. It could just literally be someone saying, hey, hi, how are you? And you saying, I'm doing well. Like, how are you doing? And smiling, you know, like that little response may be something that they're hearing for the first time that day, you know, and like there's magic to that. And it doesn't have to go any further than that. Right. But just seeing the response of how they would, you know, how they responded to that, you're going to feel so good. And it was so simple to do. Right. And so, when I get that feeling of like, wow, like I just allowed myself to be vulnerable and meet someone that I didn't know before, it gives me this confidence then to go into the next thing or next activity that I'm doing and feel like, okay, I can handle that.
Yeah.
You know, like if I could talk to a stranger, particularly maybe one that like my ego would instinctively not want to talk to, and then I go in and I do it, right? Like, what can't I do?
Yeah.
You know?
I love it.
And I think that's like the great thing about, you know, the good part of positive psychology, but also in terms of like practices and habits, is that it just starts to reprogram thinking and stories that have lasted for maybe decades for some people.
Yeah.
And it's just through these simple actions, you know? And so this idea of you can't talk to strangers or don't do that, like, like your life will change, honestly. And I'm not understating this, right? Like your life will change when you allow yourself to just go up and meet people that you don't know.
Yeah.
You're going to learn so much about yourself
totally.
and about the world and about life, you know? And so, and you get to take that into what you're doing, whether it's the next activity or through life. Like you're naturally just going to be better because of that.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Both my parents have that like weird skill that I found so embarrassing as a child. They had like this ability that like we would just be at the shops, and it's like a running joke in my family. Like my mum knows how to tell someone about my whole family in like 3 seconds. Like our entire existence, like full like ancestry.com situation. And it's like a running joke. Like my mum like will just tell everyone, but she's just, and I found it so embarrassing. And my dad has this as well. They can just like talk to people, and people come up and talk to my parents, and it's just the weirdest thing. But like as I've gotten older, I appreciate it more now. I'm like, wow, that's a skill, and it's come to benefit both of my parents in such weird ways. Like my dad has gotten so many jobs just pure, and my mum like too, just because they've just talked to people and like be nice and just like communicate. And then this person is like, oh hey, like you mentioned, you know, my mum will immediately blabber on about something. They'll be like, oh, I've actually, you know, we've got this, or this is coming up, or you know, let's talk about this, or da da da. And it comes with benefits. Like obviously if you're going out for networking purposes, then it's different. But like, it provides that energy, and it's just such a skill. And I think if you're a shy person, then it's definitely something that you can work on. And it benefits you in so many more ways than you would think. It's really interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot of kind of residual effects that just become byproducts of just you going up and saying hi to someone, right?
Yeah.
And I love what you said. Like if you're someone who's not used to doing that, just creating some level of habit or practice, right? Where it could even be once a month. Like it doesn't matter. What matters is that it's regular.
Yeah.
Right. And that it's recurring. That's the most important thing. Right.
Yeah.
And if you're able to do it, you're just gonna notice a change occur over time, where the next time you go into a social situation or the next time you go into a familiar situation, you're going to feel differently about it. Your attitude will be different as a result, and how you express yourself and how you connect and how you build those relationships will be more productive, because the effort, it'll feel effortless.
Yeah.
Right? Like it'll just feel effortless at that point, because you're going to have the right attitude going into it, you know? And so
definitely.
Yeah, there's a lot of magic there.
Definitely, 100%. So we're going to go into some audience questions here. So my first question that we've gotten is, how can I cultivate a better attitude when I hate my job? It's a very interesting question.
This is a great question. I was actually, so one of the conversations that I talked about this past weekend was, how do you turn a layoff into a career pivot? And some of the people who were there had jobs but hated it. You know? And then it got into a conversation about manifestation, because someone also said, like, they talked about how they hated their jobs and then they got fired, right? And that can happen, right? Because you put out that vibe. But I always like to kind of have this frame of, if you have to stay in the job for right now, right? If you don't have the option of leaving the job voluntarily, you have to be there, then there is something that you're meant to learn that's going to prepare you for the next big opportunity that will come, right? And whatever that is, empower yourself to find it. Find it in that work. You may hate it, But if you knew there was a diamond at the end, like if someone told you like, I know this job is awful, but when you're done and we fire you, we're going to give you a $10 million compensation package, right? We just want to make sure that you're clear on the lesson that you've learned having had this job, right? Like you would go to the ends of the earth to figure out what this lesson is, right? And so have the enthusiasm, not so much for the job, but what the job it can give you, right? Like what can you learn that you know is going to be an invaluable skill? So when you get the opportunity next to provide it to you, you can say, you know what, this is the very skill that I bring to the table, and that's going to end up being the thing that they are going to need, and make it so easy to hire you. You know, and so
that's great. That is really good advice. That is like, I wasn't sure how you got to answer that question, because when we got sent it, I was like, this is really interesting. But yeah, I like
there's a lot of people struggling with their with where they are in their career and the job that they have, and I totally get it, you know. And sometimes we don't have the ability to say, okay, well, I'm just going to change jobs, right? There might be various circumstances that can prevent us from doing that, you know. And so and that just means that you're probably just meant to be there for a little bit, right? So if you're going to be there, there's a lesson to be learned that is going to take you to the next level, right? So look for that lesson, hone in on it, craft it, let it become your thing, because then it's going to be the thing that gets you to that next level, you know? And I've experienced it firsthand. I've seen my clients experience it. It really does happen that way.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I think, you know, my mom always says, like everything's either a blessing or a lesson. Sometimes it's both, but yeah, you can always learn something, and you always walk away with a skill from a job. Like no matter what it is, you always walk away with having developed something. But yeah, so that brings us to the end of our audience questions. So we're going to go into open mic now. So this is where Thomas gets to talk about pretty much whatever it is that he feels like chatting about. Can be related to the topic, doesn't have to be. But yeah, so I forfeit all my hosting duties and pass them over to you. This is your job now. I can just sit here, drink my margarita, just no. So what do you want to talk about?
You know, this has been such a great conversation, and I want to thank you, Tia, for inviting me and bringing me on to talk about this, because it is an important thing, and I want to remind people that productivity is not just about doing. You know, it's also about what you're not doing. You know, and when you're not doing something, what does that space create for you? And where I'm going with this is ultimately what it comes down to everything. This is like kind of what my body of work has been about in my career, has been about relationships. You know, the most important relationship that you'll ever have in your life is the one with yourself. And we talked about, you know, how do we get into a productive self, right? And it starts with attitude, your thoughts, your feelings, and then your behaviors towards yourself. Right. And so I love asking clients, what is the story that defines where you are in your life right now?
Oh,
and
wow.
What's going to be the story that's going to define your immediate future? Right. And what are the feelings that come with that? Right. What are the feelings that comes with those stories? And allow yourself to feel them and process them. And what are the behaviors? You know, what are the behaviors that brought you to where you are right now? If you can be really, you know, honest and unapologetic about it, you know, whether you're happy with where you are in your life or not, right? Like really take an inventory and look at, you know, this is the story I've allowed myself to have that has kept me not where I want to be. Or it has got me to where I want to be, right? Like allow yourself and process that. And now that that's complete, we don't need to look at that anymore, because that's the past. And now we get to focus on, okay, what's the story that's going to define my present moment right now? How do I want to feel about myself? And how do I want to carry that through life? And then what are going to be the behaviors, the practices, the habits, however you want to call it, right? But what are going to be those behaviors that's going to instill that belief and create that world and those feelings that I want to have? You know, we get presented this idea that this kind of formula of have plus do equals be, right? Which basically means like, if I get that promotion, if I get in that relationship, if I have that money, I'll be able to do all these things, and then I'll be happy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we find out that there's a lot of people on this earth who have a lot of money, who have the relationship, who have the fame, the status, who are not happy. So that's actually not a recipe for success.
Yeah.
And so I spent a lot of time thinking about, well, how do we modify this, right? How do we put this in a place where we actually get to experience success, but not at the cost of our happiness?
Yeah.
And so the formula that I came up with originally was be plus do equals have, right? If I want to be happy, then I need to do happy things. I need to do things that make me happy, right? And the momentum of doing those things will allow me to have what I'm meant to have, right? Which requires me to release the look of kind of what it looks like to have what it is that I want.
Yeah.
Right? Do I want to lose 20 pounds, or do I want to be healthy and live another 20 years?
Yeah.
Right? Like, I might just need to lose 10 pounds for that to happen. Right? I don't know. I just want to be healthy. So I'm just going to do the things that healthy people do and live another 20 years. And maybe I'll lose 10 pounds. Maybe I'll lose 30. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not going to attach myself to that. Right? Because that's not what's going to make me happy or healthy. And so then I realized the doing is really it's still the driving force for a lot of people. And I think it can be a good thing.
Yeah.
If we put the being beforehand. And so my formula for having and manifestation is be times do equals have. If you want to be healthy, be happy, be prosperous, be abundant, then you do those things, and you do those things repeatedly. You don't do it once and all of a sudden imagine that, like, okay, this is happening now, right? Like, the instant gratification for that does not work.
Yep.
It has to be done repeatedly in whatever cadence you feel comfortable with, especially if you're just starting out.
Yeah.
But it's the repetition and the reoccurring nature is key. And eventually you will get to have what it is that you want. And the last thing I'll say is about the have. We always have these ideas of what we think is going to make us happy. And what I've found out in my personal life, but also with my clients, we're not actually chasing these external things. We're actually chasing internal feelings.
Yeah.
And we can have those feelings now.
Yeah.
And have it not be represented by the thing that we want.
Yeah.
And if we're open to that, then the limitations of what you believe life can look like all of a sudden are gone. And then the possibilities of what life can look like for you become infinite.
Yeah.
Because you've let yourself go of what you can have. And ultimately what ends up happening in life, when you let go of that, you end up getting more than what you were shooting for.
Yeah.
You actually end up experiencing life beyond like your wildest dreams. Because as good as my imagination was, I did not picture the life that I get to live today.
Yeah.
Wow. And I'm a pretty creative person.
Yeah.
Right. And I think many of us are.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was like the biggest thing that I've learned, and that's why I always stress like mindset and attitude, because it really can change everything about someone's life.
Wow. That was, you definitely found your calling. That's all I have to say. That's great. That's good. Yeah. Solid advice. That's great. Learned a lot from this episode, which I've loved, because I think, it's the start of the new year, which is where everyone's trying to, manifest and cultivate all this new stuff. And I think, it's just those little differences and those little mindset changes that are going to make the biggest difference in, your productivity, your overall health, just your perception of life, just, good energies, good vibes. So that brings us pretty much to the end of our show today. So thank you so much, Thomas Edwards Jr., for being here. It's been such a pleasure.
Yeah.
It's been amazing. So for those
Thanks for having me. This was absolutely great. I had so much fun.
I'm so glad. That's great. So for those who want to find out more about you and what you do, where can they go?
So you can go to thomasedwardsjr.com.
Yep.
Or you can find me on social media. I'm on most platforms as Thomas H. Edwards Jr.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah,
We will leave.
it's easy.
Easy as. We'll leave all the links to Thomas, his socials, everything down there. Because, yeah, definitely keep up to date with what he's doing because, yeah, he's definitely worth it. And, yeah, for those who are listening or watching, thank you so much. Don't forget to like and subscribe on whatever platform you're on. And we'll see you next week. Bye, guys. Thanks again, Thomas. You have been listening to Work in Progress, the Personal Productivity Science Insights podcast produced by the Life Management Science Labs. Listen to episodes from LMSL's 10 Life Management Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or other podcasting apps on your smartphone. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps others find us and us grow to bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at pp.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Tia Harmer. Thanks for tuning in.